Hello, extra time.
It's time to the league not to get a hype because it damages your reputation. It makes people, when they read it, just laugh at you.
It's simple enough. They're playing in the League One and they're playing in the Europa League and they're playing in the game in this country. Maybe we should get Stephen Henry down to manage the Irish team.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Extratime Football Podcast. Your host Luke Jordan, device like Donal, Ryan, Oisin, Langan today. Lads, how are we?
Good, thanks.
Good, thanks, Luke. Cheers for having us on.
Coming up later on, we chat to the Irish Daily Mirror football correspondent Paul O'Hare as we chat about the latest in the Republic of Ireland job. As you can imagine, a bit of a mess this week, the last 40 hours. People don't know who's going to be taking over the job. Is it going to be Lee Carsley? Is it going to be Chris Coleman, John O'Shea? We don't know, but we're trying to get to the bottom of Paul O'Hare. But first, we're going to turn attention to Game Week 1 in the League of Ireland. And Oisin, I'll go to you first. You were up in Waterford to see Waterford take on Shaz, their first game back. How did Damien, Duff, Shelbourne get on against Waterford?
They found it very, very difficult at the start. It took them a while to settle. They were terrible in the first half. They conceded a goal within 3 minutes. Asamoah breaking down the right-hand side. It did take a clip, but it was still a good goal, and it was well worked. Sargent, the goalkeeper, he kind of rolled it out to him, and Asamoah went on the break down the right-hand side. Now, it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't an accident. To me, it looked pre-planned. Keith Long has them very well structured. They've got some really impressive players, but you asked about Shelbourne, so I'll tell you about Shelbourne. I like to look at John O'Sullivan. He's a player whose Bows career just never really quite took off. Now, a lot of that was down to injury, but when he's focused and when he's fit, he's a very decent player, and he showed that on Friday night. I like the look of him. Lewis Temple, I think he's only 18, looked decent as part of a back three, occasionally back five, whatever way you want to phrase it. As Shelbourne played their way into the game, the really frustrating thing for them was they got back on level terms. They were on top at that stage, and then Sean Boyd. And look, I have no problem. I don't like slagging off players, but I have no problem in putting it this way. Sean Boyd got himself sent off stupidly. He's a professional footballer. He needs to do better. He needs to be smarter. We all know how good he is. A great guy as well to do interviews after games. Great guy to chat to. But that was a mistake. And Damien Duff didn't even try to defend him after the game. By the way, he said that it was the correct call. Sean Boyd has, he's one of the best in the league, but that he let himself down with what he did there. As for Waterford, Darragh Leahy settled in well. Radkowski, Horton came off the bench. Horton was signed by Keith Long. He'd worked with them before at Bows. There was talk of him going back to Bows, but I think Keith wanted him there. Asamoah was great up and down the right wing. I think he was at Leyton Orient before. Looks very skillful. He will trouble any defence. And when Waterford will have to sit deep in games, which they will a lot, I'd say, especially when they're away from home, he will be a good outball. Romeo Akachukwu, and I really hope I'm pronouncing that name right. Everyone was calling him Romeo. He's actually from Ferrybank. He's a local lad. He's only 17. Likely he's going to Southampton in the summer. But when he came on, he reminded me of George O'Callaghan. Just the way he was able to hold on to the ball, the way he was able to work the ball in tight spaces, the way he was able to pick a pass, the way that you just got excited anytime the ball came to him and he was popping up everywhere. And if you guys are possibly that bit too young to remember George O'Callaghan, are you? Yes, I'll take the silence as a yes. I'll take the silence as a yes. But George was George came back to Cork City in 04, I think it was, or maybe 03, and he just lit the league up. And George had played to a very good level. He was the Port Vale player of the season back when they were a first division / championship team. He attracted a lot of interest from clubs above Port Vale. Came back to Cork, and was unbelievably skillful. Kind of played occasionally in the hole. Wasn't an out-and-out striker, but that's kind of what Romeo reminded me of. But look, the other thing is as well, the occasion itself was fantastic. Over 4,000 fans. It wasn't a particularly pleasant night weather-wise. People would have been not blamed for not going because there was a farmers' protest and a big convoy of tractors passed. Now, that didn't actually disrupt the traffic, I think, because that happened during the game. And it's a very serious issue. So I wouldn't be giving out about farmers protesting. I actually totally understand their reason for doing it. In some cases, I don't know about this one, but I understand it in some cases it's justified. Regards this one specifically, I don't know. But look, it was. I think Waterford would be happy with the point. Shelbourne would be happy with the point, given that they were second best for a lot of it, and then had Sean Boyd sent it off. And like a lot of the players for Waterford, Bagley and guys like that who were there last year, and O'Keefe, and Dara Power, and O'Keefe and Power are local lads as well. And look, you don't mind so long as your team are winning, but it's even better if you've got some locals involved as well. And Romeo, obviously, who I mentioned, a local lad. And by extension, I'll say Padraig Hammond, even though he's from Carlow, but anyone in the southeast you'd nearly consider a local player for Waterford FC. He did well. He did exactly what you'd expect Padraig Hammond to do. So I think both managers will have taken, they'll obviously have taken a point from it, but they'll be happy enough with what they saw at the start of the season. Shelbourne will need to improve for Rovers this Friday night, but I think they can. Like Damien Duff didn't seem too perturbed after the game, and they improved throughout the game, which is a good sign as well. And their new signings look decent enough.
Yeah, just on Waterford, and you mentioned the crowd. Keith Long referenced that actually in this post match about the importance of having a big crowd, and that's gonna be a huge decider for them this season, having the home support, because it could be the make or break difference in them staying up this season.
Yeah, he did talk about that. I had a chat with him for the Extratime.com League of Ireland Voice Notes podcast, and he said that was a factor. The thing with Waterford FC fans is they just want stability. They just want a season this year that has no drama off the field. On the field, they're fine with that because that's football. But they've had such lows and such highs in the last couple of years. I think they'd nearly be happy enough for a couple of years anyway to be somewhere in between, to not have drama off the pitch, to not wonder, well, even if we stay up, are we going to go broke? And there's no sign of that, by the way. I'm not suggesting that's happening. I'm just saying this is what they want. And last year, when certain things happened with their owner, actually, sorry, I'm fully okay to say, when their owner was jailed, because that's the fact of it, I worried, and I'm sure people, it wasn't really talked about, but I'm sure people did worry. But things seem to be quite steady there still. And for Waterford FC fans, you'd be glad for them, because Lord knows they deserve it. They deserve a bit of happiness. They deserve a bit of joy. And I think if there's one thing every League of Ireland fan understands, particularly those of us who've been around a while, it's that for a long time, this was a boom and bust league, and every club has been through those days of not knowing if they're going to survive. Hopefully that's a thing of the past, and we all get stability, because that's important too. But yeah, the fans are going to be massive. There was a real buzz. Fair play to W Lord, the local station, who've really got behind it. I think they're going to broadcast the away games, but they've been giving great coverage during the week. And fair play to the fans who came from all over the county. And that's an issue for me with Waterford FC. When I was going to school on the Cork border, but very much in Waterford and very much a Waterford man, I never had sight nor sound of a Waterford United player, as they were known back then, Waterford United. And even though I played underage soccer with Ardmore, which is in Waterford, and Ballon Road, which is further into Waterford past Dungarvan, not far past Dungarvan, there was never any connection. Like, Waterford United was never a thing to me. And I think that's improving. I think there's still a bit of work to do with that. And look, anyone who knows me knows I'm actually a Cork City fan, but that's because I lived and worked in Cork and just kind of got an affinity with the club and worked there, whatever. But that seems to be improving. They seem to be getting a bit of something from around the county, but I still think there's a job. I don't think they're visible enough. Like, I live in Dungarvan now, lads, and I still don't think they're visible enough around this part, which is in the west of the county.
Well, I think that's an important point. I think that across the league, I think there has been a massive improvement in terms of, I think that's one of the factors, the way the crowds have grown. There's been this kind of growing of community work, and I think it's evident probably with the Dublin clubs probably maybe a bit more. But from my own personal experience, you can see now, if you follow the clubs online, a lot of them do a lot of work with school. And again, the crowds going up again, I think that has a huge factor of being more involved in the community.
Well, and there's a great example of it out there, and sorry to jump across you, Aoife Mullen of Extratime.com, when she was teaching, I think in RD it was, she got Stephen Kenny out to the school. RD is not in Dundalk, but Stephen Kenny got the importance of it, and Aoife, as a Dundalk fan, got the importance of creating that affinity. And I'm sure Dundalk fans kind of sprung from that. And it does happen. Like I was more into GAA as a kid, to be honest, right? Now, sorry, more into GAA at a local level. I had a big interest in English soccer as an Arsenal, and the first division was known then. But the reason I was into GAA locally, one of the reasons anyway, was because obviously the GAA club was there, but also Larry Tompkins came to my school. The Waterford ladies footballers who won All Irelands in the 90s came to the school. Tomas Mulcahy, who was a Cork senior hurler and an All Ireland winning captain, came to the school. Also, GAA coaches were sent to the school to coach us. So that's all part of it too.
Yeah, and I think anyone's gone through the Irish education system can relate to the GAA coach coming in. It does have an effect, and I'm a big believer in that. Again, it's great to see when teams win cups, for example, going to schools. It does have an everlasting effect. Switching our attention then to the north side of the city, Donal, you were commentating for Ocean FM when Sligo visited Dalymount Park. 2-2 draw. I think, again, just from reading reports and seeing the highlights, Sligo probably will find themselves kicking themselves, throwing away a goal so late.
Yeah, I mean, it was a game that was definitely there for the taking for Sligo Rovers, Luke, anyway. And, I think, as we discussed already, a lot of people have Rovers down at the wrong end of the table, and rightly so, based off last season and how it all panned out. But from what I saw in Dalymount Park, I mean, there was certainly good value for the 3 points. Bohemian's equaliser, what probably was deserved, though. James Clarke was probably the best player on the pitch in a red and black shirt, to be honest. Like, he made the first goal for Sten Reincourt and then was deserving of getting his equaliser just based off his performance alone. It was a fine header down into the bottom right corner as well. So he did very well. But from a Sligo Rovers point of view, certainly you could argue that Rovers did enough to hang on to all 3 points. But as the second half wore on, it just looked like they kind of ran out of gas, to be honest. Fabrice Hartman was taken off after 60 minutes after scoring an absolutely fantastic individual goal. If you haven't seen that, get onto the FAI TV highlights on YouTube. I think the League of Ireland page on Twitter shared it as well, so have a look at that as well. But we touched on that as well, Luke, in last week's episode about how that's the kind of potential that Fabrice Hartman has, and if John Russell can get a tune out of him this season and he can stay fit, he'll certainly have quite a player on his hands, and we certainly saw glimpses of that as well. And another player we highlighted was Simon Power, and wow, what a show he put on for Sligo Rovers at Dalymount Park on Friday night as well. Certainly getting the fans up off their seats. Played very well. Looked like he'd been playing for Rovers for the last 10 years, never mind his first competitive game, really right at home, and will certainly add an edge to the Rovers attack. From a Bohemians perspective now, I think they'll definitely be coming away from that with a lot more to worry about than Sligo Rovers. Going into the game with only 2 recognised centre halves in the squad, and Rob Cornwall does his cruciate halfway through the first half. He left I saw him afterwards leaving the ground on crutches and with a brace on. So that was before it was confirmed he did his cruciate. But you'd certainly have to say it does leave Bohemians in a fairly precarious position going into the weeks and months ahead of the new season.
Donal, sorry to jump in there, but would you say that from what you saw of Bohs, they haven't actually fixed any of the problems of last year, and with Cornwall gone, that's kind of exacerbated now? And to be fair, Cornwall being there, I thought, okay, he's going to be steady in the back there, and then they lose him, and you're thinking, Devine just cannot buy a break here, especially when it comes to defending. I just felt so bad for them.
Just on that, Donal, as well, that's the one thing Stephen Doyle highlighted last week when he was with us. He said they can't afford the loss in centre back, and then, as you said, first half injury on Cornwall, that's just horrendous stuff for Bohs this year.
Yeah, like Oisin, you were saying there that Declan Devine can't buy a break or whatever, and I'm sure the recruitment isn't completely down to him at Bohemians. I'm sure there are people a bit higher up that have a bit more to answer to. But when you're going into the season leaving yourself open like that, I mean, Bohs had to rejig their whole back line for the end of the first half anyway. Paddy Kirk was drafted in to go in at centre half. Now, I'd be quite familiar with having seen him play at Sligo Rovers the year before he went to Bohemians, and of course keeping an eye on him last year at Bohs as well. And I never ever saw him playing at centre half. And it was ultimately it stifled Bohs themselves, really, because they were losing Kirk's kind of dynamic going forward out at full back, making overlapping runs and getting into the opposition half and getting as far as the other box. When they moved him in at centre half, they couldn't do that. And then they brought on one of their Estonian signings, Michael Lilander, at half time to try and plug that gap. And he really kind of wasn't offering the same kind of threat that Kirk was offering at all. Any time he got the ball, he seemed to kind of venture forward a little bit and then just turn and square it back to Cian Byrne. And that was something that both fans were getting fairly irritated with as the second half drew on, because Rovers had gone ahead and were looking good value for the lead as well, and there was no real sign of Bohs getting back into the game until Sligo Rovers, as I said, just kind of ran out of steam with about 75 minutes on the clock.
It's kind of mad because at the RSC I saw 3, potentially 4 of what could have been Bohs back 4 this year, if that makes sense. Dara Leahy, I'd be fairly certain they went for him. He went and he worked with Keith Long because he'd worked with them before at Bohs. Radkowski, who was at Bohs last year. Horton, who I think Bohs went for again, if you're to believe the stories, and why wouldn't you? and there's one other that I mentioned. I mentioned Dara Leahy already. So they have tried.
Ryan Burke as well, wasn't it?
That's potentially, yeah. And Ryan Burke was decent actually. And like that's, so they have tried. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened. I'm not quite sure now how much they went for those players or how much they thought they might need them with Rob Cornwall back. I don't know. I'm sure they have other injuries as well, but at the moment they just look very, very light at the back at the very start of the season as well, you know.
With that said, Oisin, though, I mean, Rob Cornwall coming back, okay, it's a big signing at the back, but it's one player. Yeah. You know, like, I mean, they had Radkowski there. Why let him go unless you're kind of sure, or you're banking on another couple of signings coming in? Like going into the start of the season, as I mentioned already, with two recognised centre halves. I mean, I no disrespect to Rob Cornwall, of course, I wish him all the best in his recovery, but you're nearly asked. It was nearly crying out for it. Like you could see something was going to happen when you're leaving yourself in that kind of a precarious position, you know. It's like it was almost bound to happen that something drastic like that was going to happen, which would just deepen Bo's injury woes even further. Now, I mean, the window is still open. I mean, I think we're recording here on Tuesday evening, and I think it's the 22nd that the window closes. So we might see a couple of last gas deals getting over the line by the time this has gone out. But, you know, as I said, it's just not looking good for Bohemians at all. And to be honest, they only really do have themselves to blame, given who they had and who they let go and what could have been.
But
and
it's not a case.
I don't know exactly.
They have to go in. They have to go into the market. Like it's not a case of they have 2 days now to get two centre backs in the door.
And the worrying thing is right. I mentioned some players who went to Waterford there. I'm sure they went for any available centre back. I don't mean that in a bad sense. I mean they would have gone for all the good ones. So I'm sure they would have looked at Conor Keeley as well, because Conor Keeley, it was obvious he was going to leave Drogheda. He wanted full-time football. And I think he had his choice of a few clubs in the league and maybe a couple in England as well, possibly Scotland. And he chose Pats. Radkowski, again, I don't know, was he let go or did he go and choose Waterford? Leahy, I don't know if they talked, but like all of the defenders who you would say would slot in there or could be good for them or became available, they, for one reason or another, either chose not to go for it, didn't go for it, or didn't get, which worries me.
No, it's not the first time as well that Bows have been turned down. Like you look at other players coming back into the league, like even from a Sligo Rovers perspective, Ed McGinty was strongly linked, like he was going to Bohemians. But I think as soon as Sligo Rovers were in any way a possibility for him, he was only coming back to one place. And I think Luke Turner, that was signed for St. Pat's as well from Cliftonville, I think Bows were looking at him as well. But I think he was happy to go and play for St. Pat's, as he was a Pats fan growing up, as I understand. So, you know, I'm sure that, like as you mentioned, they have tried, but like they've been beaten to the punch at nearly every opportunity they've turned to this off season and in this transfer window. Well, you can say it's just bad luck as well, but like that doesn't really wash with supporters, and it certainly doesn't wash when you only have one fit centre back now at the club.
Well, and the point as well is that you mentioned with Pats possibly getting 2 players maybe they were in for, like how costly was missing out in European football last year. Like that's probably a huge factor the way players have not gone there. Also budgets too.
Sorry, that was a question rather than a statement or a mixture of both. Well, it certainly wouldn't have helped them, but they're still a big club. There's still good things happening there. And as to why they weren't able to get the players that they wanted, and it's clear and obvious that they didn't. Now, who they went, again, I'll repeat, we've mentioned players here. I don't know for certain who they did or didn't go for, but it's clear and obvious that they needed defensive cover and they didn't necessarily get the names that they wanted. Why that is, I'm not sure.
Could be for any number of reasons as well. And obviously, of course, just to back up what Oisin said about players that we've mentioned as well, we don't know the ins and outs of what's gone on, or, you know, things happen in football for a variety of different reasons, you know, but it's both can probably consider themselves unfortunate to a degree that they don't have the players or they don't have the cover that they need. But, you know, a lot of it lies at their own feet as well, I have to say.
Speaking of injuries, we'll go to the south side of the city now. Neil Ferrugia, that's Oisin, that's very unfortunate from a footballing point of view. He's had such a hard time with injuries over the last couple of years. Looked great in the President's Cup again. Looked fit, ready to go, and then pick up such an unfortunate injury on Friday again with a shoulder. Stephen Bradley said after the game, possibly 2 to 3 months out now. That's a huge blow for Rovers, but on a personal level for him, like, you got to feel for him.
You do. Look, the only luck, in inverted commas, is that it happened so early in the season that he could potentially be fit for Europe and crunch time for Shamrock Rovers. Also, I was at the Waterford game. I heard he got injured, and at first people were saying broken collarbone, and I've no medical qualifications, but I think that's worse than a dislocated shoulder, which is still bad, but not as good or not as bad as it could have been. Rovers, they've got a deep squad. It doesn't matter how deep your squad is, you are going to miss a player of that quality. But look, hopefully he'll be back soon and will make a speedy recovery. You don't want to see any player in any team miss out through injuries. But is it a blow to Shamrock Rovers? Yes, it is. Are they probably the best equipped to handle that blow? Yeah, they are. Them, Derry, and St. Pat's have very deep squads. So if there's any three teams, we'll say, who could handle that blow, especially at this time of the season, it's probably Rovers or either of those two teams that I mentioned there, Derry and St. Pat's.
Yeah, and our reporter, Rory Merriman, was at the game, and after the match, he was in the media scrum. So we're going to listen to Stephen Paddy talk about the injury and about the game itself.
Neil is dislocated, and when he was in hospital, they relocated it back in. Now we just have to wait. I'm not sure the bone here, but that's not broke, so we have to wait for see if there's any other damage really. But yeah, it dislocated. Probably summed up how we started. We started really well. We were in control of the game. We were causing a lot of problems, and he was causing a lot of problems. And then obviously that happened. And the 10 minutes completely just took the energy out of the game. Like, you know, we were really flat then for that rest of the first half. Trevor coming on and getting injured didn't help. And just completely flat in this first half. Second half we were a lot better, but the first half after that was a non-game really.
Dundalk then 1-1 draw. As James Rogers said last week in the podcast, he don't know what you're going to get from Dundalk this year. A lot of new faces, crucial players out the door. But again, Oisin, 1-1 draw in Tallaght Stadium. Doesn't matter if it's the first game of the season, middle of the season, end of the season. That's always a good result.
Great result. Now I have to confess, I've watched 3 of the 5 games from last Friday night. This is not one of them. But from what I heard from Barry Murphy, formerly of Shamrock Rovers and St. Pat's, who joined us on the Voice Notes podcast, Dundalk were decent, good performance. And Gullan took his free kick very well, but the keeper did not cover himself with glory. And that's Barry Murphy said, maybe he gave himself too much to do. He left too much of the goal open. So that was interesting. Aaron Green's still doing it after all this time. Isn't it amazing? There are certain players who you just want to keep around, and Aaron Green is one of those players. Like, the effort he puts in when he's out on that pitch, I'm sure that's replicated in training, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons that Stephen Bradley likes having him around, and the fact that he's quite an effective player as well. Got his header. There was a good block. I think Gaffney made a block on a Dundalk defender, so Green could have that free header, which was clever play as well. Again, that's more experience, more craft, more guile. One thing I would say as well about Dundalk, George Shelby, the goalkeeper, I actually, by a bizarre quirk, commentated on him on a Nottingham Forest Eintracht Frankfurt friendly game pre-season, and he was very impressive. I was surprised when I heard he was going to the League of Ireland, because I thought he was decent enough that he could possibly be Nottingham Forest number 2, or maybe play for a championship club. So I think that's a great signing. Again, Barry said he looked really solid and really good, which is so important. Look, did we get too many questions answered about either team in this game? Possibly not, but a really good result for Dundalk to start the season with, at a venue that they've struggled in the last couple of years. And there is a question mark about Dundalk. Like, no point in us talking about Rovers. I think we know exactly what we're going to get there and what they're going to do this year. And if they don't win the title, they're going to be close to it. But Dundalk, there are question marks, because they brought in so much talent from Scotland and England. You just don't know how these players will go. But look, they seem to be okay on Friday night. And it was really good to see as well. I didn't see it again. But Aoife Mullen, who was at the game, and Barry Murphy, who's obviously joined me on the podcast afterwards, both separately actually said that Andy Boyle was decent. So that's a good sign as well, that Andy's kind of still able to do it. Robbie Benson, I think, played as well quite well. So, yeah. And great to see Mountney's still around there as well. I thought his time at Dundalk was done. But great to see him around there as well. This shouldn't come into it when you're judging players, but he's a top quality player. So I'm glad for him as well. Top quality lad, I mean.
Sorry, guys. Just on that, Luke, before we move on as well, I think, as Oisin mentioned, there would have been a lot of questions about Dundalk going into the new season. I know, like bringing in a huge influx of players as the likes of Bohemians and Sligo Rovers have done as well. Like, nobody can really say for sure how their season is going to go until we're at least maybe the full first round of fixtures into the league season. But to go up to Tallaght, as Oisin mentioned as well, and to get a result where they've historically struggled, particularly over the last few years, you could argue maybe Ferrugia's injury probably put a dent in Shamrock Rovers' performance in the first half, and then they lost Trevor Clarke as well in the second half to an injury. I'm not too sure the extent of his, but
half injured, I think.
Yeah, but it's still a big a big loss, and given that he came on to replace Ferrugia as well, there will be two holes in the Shamrock Rovers side. But from a Dundalk perspective, like, it's certainly a very, very valuable point at an early stage in the season to go up to Tallaght, and to go up to Tallaght at any stage and to come away with any kind of a result is a good result. Particularly for Dundalk, who will be an unknown entity this year, and whether it'll just depend on the sheer amount of players that they brought in, whether they click or not at the right stage of the season. So to go up there and grab a point in a 1-0 draw, I think they'll be quite happy with that.
And they do have a very solid starting 11, like that 11 that started against Shamrock Rovers, right? You've got Horgan on the left and O'Kane on the right, two extremely decent players who can open up any defence. You've got Boyle in the kind of centre of that back 3 or 5, whatever way you want to put it. Archie Davis, who was the player of the year last year, who stood out in what was a tough season for Dundalk, but they still came fifth despite all the problems and all the injuries, which is actually quite the achievement for Stevie O'Donnell. And he's not getting any credit for it, and I think he should. Benson, still there as well, and Shelby in goal, decent keeper. And Mayo, by the way, a local lad, saw him play a couple of times, really impressed with him. So there's a solid base there. Again, the one issue, or one of the issues they might have, is depth. But yeah, still, I think it's a good solid start for what was a solid looking 11.
Yeah, I think it's a good point you mentioned a few minutes ago about the players coming in. Like, whenever I think of Scottish players coming to the League of Ireland, it's either a Gary Twigg effect where could be brilliant, or I don't know if it's a bit of a niche reference for any people like Pats, but you've got a Martin Rennie effect where you pay money for a player that comes over and he's absolutely hopeless. So again, it's a risk going into second, third division Scotland. You never know what you're going to get. And we mentioned on the previous show, McDara, Leon Poles. I'd have huge question marks over that, over him being the number one this season. I think I agree with Barry Murphy. I'm no goalkeeper, but when you listen back in the podcast and you watch the goal back up, listen to Barry Murphy, like, it's not really it's centre the goal. It's not even in the corner. It's a decent free kick, don't get me wrong, but you think goalkeeper, does that a man to save that? Even a 41, probably. So I'd have question marks for Rovers in terms of the goalkeeper there. But actually, we have a bit of audio again from the game. So Rory Merriam again was at the game, and he heard from Jamie Gullan. Have a listen.
Enjoyed it. Enjoyed being back out there, playing football, just doing what I love. So over the moon to get off the mark on the first game, and I think we gave absolutely everything into that game, and a point was deserved. Maybe on another day 3, but yeah, no. Delighted to start. To be fair, it wasn't discussed. I think Scott High had the ball, and I was like, no, please, you give me it. So thankfully gave me it, and then just when it left my foot, I knew it had a chance, and thankfully it went in.
Really quick then, just to wrap up the Premier Division, Pats then and Galway, a 1-0 win for the Saints as they faced Galway in not the best conditions. It was scrappy, it was wet, it was windy, the pitch cut up, but Roisin, you get a win away at Galway this season. I think that's going to be a good result for any team.
I think to start the season like that is absolutely brilliant for St. Pat's. And I watched this game back, and I think I could have stopped after 3 minutes. And there was nothing particularly wrong with what Galway did, and there was nothing particularly wrong with what St. Pat's did for all the reasons you just mentioned there. It wasn't a great night for football. And what Galway are possibly missing, and Ollie Neary, formerly of Galway United, who was on CoCom for LOI TV. And by the way, congratulations to Cian O'Connell, who did his first Premier Division game for LOI TV. He's been doing games for Galway United for years. He was excellent, and he was exactly what you'd want from a commentator. He was neutral. He was just as good for Pats as he was for Galway. But anyway, Ollie pointed out that Chris Forrester, is that player for Pats that can open up defences, and they have a few. Maybe that's something that Galway were missing on the night, and that's something that they need to work on. Nothing wrong with their work rate, nothing wrong with the effort. They'll take a lot of points in Eamon DC Park. But look, the conditions that night did not lend to a good game. And it's always tough at the start of the season as well when teams haven't found their rhythm. Connor Keeley looks a really good acquisition. And now I've seen Connor for Cabinteely in the first division. I've seen him play for Ballymena an awful lot actually in the Irish League. So I've covered an awful lot of Irish League with BBC. And he was someone I could never believe wasn't snapped up by a League of Ireland team. So I was delighted for Kevin and for Drogheda when he went there. And obviously what he did at Drogheda earned him his move to St. Pat's, and he had multiple choices. And him and Redmond together at the back, that could be the difference for Pats this year. And I'm looking at that Pats team and squad, and it's really strong. I actually, because I'm doing Pats and Bows on Friday night, I did my Pats squad list today, and I was actually thinking to myself, wow, this is a very strong squad. What about the game itself, Luke, and the conditions itself over in Eamon DC Park? It's been a long time, and they've been waiting for Premier League football for a while, or Premier Division football, I should say. I was there last year for the Dundalk Galway game in the Cup. I think it's a really impressive venue. What did you think of the night itself? How are fans going to get on when they travel there in their numbers this season?
Yeah, like I was going to say in the intro, scrappy. I think you summed it up pretty well. I think if you just watched the first 3 minutes of the match and saw Jamie Lennon's goal, that's pretty much the game. Pats kind of knew themselves. Once they got ahead, Galway, and the fairness, Paul kind of highlighted this as well. They lack an attacking player. They maybe even lack probably a creative player. So they're going to be very reliant on set piece this season. And look, I think a good season for Galway is coming that 8th position. So long as they come 8th, that's a good season for them. But the conditions weren't great. My only kind of annoyance about the game was, I suppose, also being at the match, that the ticket allocation was 450 approximately away fans. I think the idea was to sell out the stadium. That didn't happen. I don't know, personal opinion, I don't know what you guys think, but I think there's no reason to why you can't maybe increase the away allocation, possibly 600, 700 if you have the spare tickets. Like, why not open up the ground a bit more, push the home fans a bit further down the stand to try and get more people at the games. Like, I think around 4,100 a game. That could easily be nearly a sellout. I think the situation we're in Irish football, I think money's at a premium. If you can squeeze pennies out of more away fans to come to games, which there is a demand, especially probably the Dublin teams want to go to Galway. They haven't been there in a couple of years. The Bohemians, the Rovers, the Shelbourne, the Pats teams, or Pats. I just think, why not increase your away allocation if you're not going to sell at the home ground? That's only my personal opinion. Yeah,
and I can understand that, and I know that there's talk about the amount of away fans who can go to Derry as well. Now there is a reconstruction going on there, so maybe that's part of the issue as well, that they only have so much room. Explain to me, Luke, if you can, was there a big gap between the home fans and the away fans in that stand? The one that's as you enter the ground, the away fans are pretty much in that corner. Is that was that the situation?
Yeah, it was just the away fans were in the corner. There was the typical green kind of cloth. You see, I don't know what the exact wording for it is, and then there was just empty seats. Like, again, and this isn't me having a go at Galway United or having a go at the fans. Like, there was 4,100 games, it was a brilliant spectacle. I'm just thinking to myself personally, if you have 300 spare seats, possibly is it possibly worth to push down the home fans further on, bring more away fans into the game, guess maybe 600 away fans in. I just know myself, obviously I'm biased, I'm a Pats fan, everyone knows that, but I know there was a huge demand for tickets for this game. I mean, the portal went live, I think around 10 to 7 on the week before the match, and the tickets were sold out in, I think, 3 minutes. So like, that tells you the demand for the away game this season for Pats. And just thinking to myself, why not try and increase your allocation?
Can I ask, was the game listed? Did Galway say that the game had sold out? Or was it, I understand it was the away allocation that had sold out, but were Galway marking it as a sellout at all, or?
They on their Twitter page, and we don't go with social media, they were putting out that the game will sell out, there's limited tickets left. But again, like, that's probably a lot of clubs do that. That's a marketing strategy, try and, tickets are running out, better buy them quick. Like, that's marketing 101. But it was just more the case of, I'm looking at going, if by the Wednesday you still have maybe 400 or 500 floating tickets left, is it worth just increasing the away allocation even by 200 and leave 200 on the float down?
Did they ever explain, Luke, why the allocation was what it was?
No, the Pats just made a statement, and look, Pats fans are. I can only go on the information I have, but just looking from social media, reading the comments, what the club are saying, that was the tickets they were giving. They're giving 10% of the ground. That's 450. I think the ground holds now 4,500. So they're giving a 10% allocation, which is by the FEI, and that was it. There was no extra tickets made available. I understand first day of the season, maybe they thought they would sell out, but if you know by the Wednesday, you still have a flow of tickets left. For me, I just think the whole time, tickets, sell. It doesn't matter who's in the ticket ground. Just get money in the door, in the gates, especially with Galway. It's a big game for them, first day back. Fans want to go, like I said. Galway's one of the best places in Ireland to go. So when you get to go to a game there and enjoy a possible night after, why not? Like, that's my
I understand what you mean. I understand what you mean, but I suppose from their point of view, maybe, and again, I'm saying maybe because I don't know the situation, they were thinking, well, if it's a nice day or a nice evening, which it wasn't, we'll have 200 or 300 home fans buy tickets on the day, or we'll fill that spot on the day. I don't know what the thinking was, but maybe that was it as well. If they'd given the actual, the allocated allocation as set down by the rules, then they'll say, well, look, we've done what we're supposed to do here. They may also look and say, well, it's the first night of the season. Is this going to happen all the time? It's a great away trip, but will we sell out our away allocation? Do we have to increase that away allocation for every game? We're not so sure. And maybe if in 8-9 weeks they're getting far more interest from away fans than they thought, maybe they will. But I just think I can understand their reasoning for not doing that. The other thing I would say as well, and I want to be very, very clear, I know that there was no harm. I know that there was no bad intent. But when the goal was scored, I saw fans jumping on to celebrate with players. It's something I hate in every ground. Fans have no right on the pitch, even for a joyous reason like that. And look, and I want to repeat, there was no harm in it. There was nothing dangerous. There was no malice. From what I could see, it was mostly overexcited young fellas. That's cool. You want people feeling that way about sport, but you also have to stay off the pitch. And by the way, before anyone accuses me of bias, I had a pop at my own fans. Sorry, they're not fans of me. Fans who I support the club with, Cork City fans, for doing pretty much the exact same thing in Galway last year. If you're a fan, you have no right on the pitch for any reason.
I thought your fans were jumping in front of I thought they were jumping in front of the commentary booth now from now on when they see it. I thought that's what you were claiming there.
That's right, yeah.
No, I agree. And look, you want passion in sport, but again, I would agree with you. I was a bit disappointed over that myself. Like, you don't want overzealous fans going on the pitch, because where's the end then? I even hate it personally when people run the pitch after a game, if it's semi-final or final. It actually annoys me in that. So again, yeah, I totally agree with that. We can all of us echo that kind of statement. We don't want people on the pitch, and even actually international matches, seeing people run across the pitch over selfies, that kind of crap. No, don't want that in sport. And last game, really quick then, just to go through the result again, it was Derry City 2, Drogheda 1. Surprise, Pat Hooven scores. Water's wet, I suppose, in that case. Lads, we'll leave it there for time. Donal, Oisin, thanks for that.
No bother, Luke. My pleasure.
Going next down, we chat to Paul O'Hare about the latest on the Irish job.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland, or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to the second half. Did I say Paul O'Hare is with us? Paul, how are you?
Good, thanks, Luke. Yeah, how are you? Are you well?
Yeah, good to see you again. I suppose before we maybe get chatting about the latest and the hot seat for the Republic of Ireland job, League of Ireland's back on Friday night. You were at a game yourself?
Yeah, I was in Tallaght for Shamrock Rovers and Dundalk. It was, good to be back. Went to obviously a couple of kind of pre-season games and some of those Leinster Senior Cup games in January, and the new kind of league or the new format that they're doing. But it was good to get back to an actual big game with a big crowd, and the new stand and all that, and Tallaght looking well. And it was interesting to see both Rovers and Dundalk. Rovers obviously had looked very impressive, I thought, in the President's Cup, but you can't really read a huge amount into one performance in what is still really a glorified friendly. But I thought Rovers looked really, really sharp against Pats, and Stephen Bradley had been making the point to us in a press conference in the build-up to the Dundalk game about how last season the players only got 3 weeks off between the end of their season and going back into pre-season. he only gave them 3 weeks off, and he was making the point that he noticed a bit of mental fatigue in the players come summertime, whereas this year he gave them 7 weeks off. Pico Lopez obviously didn't. He only got 5 days off because of Cape Verde's training camp before the AFCON, and then obviously the run to the quarterfinals prolonged his stay out there. And he's away on holidays now, and he'll miss maybe the first 3 or 4 games of the season. I think the plan is. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting, just in terms of a mental recharge as opposed to anything else. And yeah, look, on Friday night they looked okay, I think, up until the Neil Farrugia injury midway through the first half, and that, there was a 9-10 minute stoppage to the game, and definitely disrupted Rovers, because Farrugia had probably been their most potent attacking sort of weapon on that right hand side up until the injury. He dislocated his shoulder, obviously, and could be out for a number of months apparently. So that kind of disrupted their flow. And Dundalk, in fairness to them, once the game restarted, Dundalk won the free kick, and the new signing Jamie Gullan, absolutely cracking free kick, great goal. It was really interesting to see Dundalk as well, because they've so many new players. They've 5 debutants in the starting team alone. I think there might have been a bit of concern among Dundalk fans early in the season, or early in pre-season and over the winter, that maybe they weren't making signings quick enough, or that bodies were slow through the door. But again, a bit like sort of trying to read too much into a President's Cup game, Dundalk looked decent on Friday night in that first league game. It is only 1 game, so let's hold judgment until we see a few games. But certainly seems to be a decent bit of potential in that Dundalk team, I think.
Just on Rovers, I suppose, the one player talked about the President's Cup, and again, he was involved in the goal on Friday night, Conan Newton. Looks like maybe the possible breakout star this year.
Yeah, for sure. Bradley and the rest of the coaching staff for Rovers really, really rate him, and I think he was man of the match in that President's Cup game and ran the show in midfield. And it was good to see another young player at Rovers being trusted to start in an opening league game like that. And he absolutely did his cause no harm whatsoever on Friday night. Yeah, he had a decent game. He came off sort of midway through the second half or so, but he had played well up until that point.
Anyone else stand out of the game?
I like to look at Josh Honahan, the new Rover signing. Obviously, he played for Cork City last year, but maybe it's just one of those things when a team is down the wrong end of the table that you're not really probably seeing them all the time, and you're not really sort of, players aren't always catching your eye. But he gets a move to a big club like Rovers, and then suddenly he's thrust into the spotlight. And I thought he was excellent in the President's Cup. He's pretty versatile in terms of where he plays in defence, and he's been playing across the back three, on the left side of the back three for Rovers in that President's Cup, and again in the Dundalk game. Obviously, Pico Lopez is away, so there's just kind of a position up for grabs. Lee Grace was on the bench, but I think just Honahan, he's a big physical player, big man, for a 22-year-old, big strong fella. Really comfortable on the ball, and just seems to, he's good anticipation about him in terms of his reading of the game, and he carried a bit of a threat in the box as well. He probably could have and should have scored a winner the other night. At least I think it would have been the winner. Just trying to think of what stage of the game his header was, but it was certainly in the second half anyway. And to me, he's kind of stood out in the very, very early stages of the season. Dundalk's fellow up front, Jamie Gullan, looks decent. Midfielder Scott High, who's played, I think it's 40, 50 championship games for Huddersfield, I think it is. He definitely looks like a decent player. So certainly if I was a Dundalk fan, I'd be excited enough about some of the signings that they've brought in just on the initial first glimpse.
Just in the last one, the League of Ireland, I was making the point last week, and just interested to get your thoughts on it. I was saying this could be a year possibly we might have a title race. I was maybe a bit dismissive maybe after the President's Cup, after seeing Rovers felt like a total domination, but Dundalk getting a point in Tallaght, Pats winning away, Derry, I know it's early doors, but Derry winning at home. Think there's maybe a sniff of title race this season, maybe 3 teams competing for the league, or do you think it's just Rovers to lose?
I still think it's Rovers to lose. They've made minimal changes, and I think if they just get into stride, and particularly, like people will look, they drew on Friday night. They probably just lacked a little bit of sharpness in the final third, I think. Bradley sort of said as much afterwards, but they'll improve a lot. I don't see them having quite the same slow start as they did last season, where it took them 6-7 games to win. I don't see that. They haven't made too many changes, and they seem to have brought in a couple of clever signings. Derry, in fairness to them, Derry have only made a handful of 2 signings. I think Patrick Hoban and Daniel Kelly, and I think Hoban, like, he's up and running already, getting the kind of decisive goal in that win over Drogheda, and he, doesn't take a genius to sort of predict that Pat Hoban's going to score a load of goals, but that's certainly what Derry were missing. Games that they should have won, they were drawn last year. Games that they should have drawn, they might have lost at times. And I really do think that Hoban is just going to be a big, big difference maker for Derry City this season. So I think Derry will improve. Pats of 10 new signings. They still have the core of a good team that pushed hard last year for a long period of time, and obviously ended up winning the cup. But they've 10 new signings to bet in, and that's a lot, that's an awful lot. But look, they got off to a great result. Tricky game down in Galway, big crowd in, place was hopping by all accounts. The pitch was bad. They scored early and hung on to a lead. I think any team that comes away with a win down in Galway this season will actually be doing all right. So, look, hopefully there is a proper title race. We're always crying out for it year after year, and it's well documented that I think last season some of the clubs just let themselves down at times in the season, because Rovers were there for the taking all year long, and still won at arm's length. So. Hopefully there will be a title race. I think Derry will be the best of the rest. I think the minimal squad changes that they've made, 2 good signings, and if Pat Hoban stays fit, I think he could be a big difference maker for them. But I still think Rovers will win the league.
Moving on then to, I suppose, the hot topic in the last 24 hours, the Republic of Ireland job. I suppose the question is, where are we going, Paul? Lee Carsley was the man. It looks like they're not getting their date to the prom, and we're looking for someone else to step up. Neil Lennon has been ruled out by all accounts. Chris Coleman's name came into the hat now the last 24 hours. So what's the latest, I suppose, is the easy way to answer that question.
Well, it's been dragging on now. It's into week 12 or 13, and it's definitely becoming a bit of a mess, The Chris Coleman stuff, obviously, I personally put little or no kind of stock into bookies markets. It doesn't take an awful lot of money to move a candidate on a bookies list when it comes to next manager betting. So I wouldn't be reading too much into those types of things. But at the same time, Coleman has actually been kind of 3rd or 4th favourite on the list for a long time, which to me suggests that way back when, in the early stages of the process, that there must have been contact with him back then when the FAI were kind of compiling a long list of candidates. So he's not a completely left field name. It's not like over the weekend that he suddenly emerged from nowhere. He has been kind of in the conversation without really being sort of discussed at length in terms of the media stuff. But it's just become a bit of a messy process. And the weird one with Coleman is, from what I'm led to believe, there definitely has been kind of discussions with him, and there's been ideas of who might form sort of backroom staff with him. Maybe it's one last play to try and flush Lee Carsley out and get the preferred number 1 candidate over the line, depending on who you talk to. Like, Carsley has kept his cards really, really close to his chest. He's not out there peddling stuff through back channels in the media with people he knows and stuff like that. They've kept it tight. And the English FA, I think, have always been fairly confident that he would stay with them. Anybody kind of close to Carsley seems to be fairly adamant that he's not for turning, that, whatever talks there had broken down, not necessarily over pay or his salary, but maybe just the overall financial package on offer to kind of bring in this sort of support staff that he would want and that he'd be looking for. And that's kind of led the FAI, obviously, to kind of alternative candidates. But like the Coleman one is strange in that they have been, the FAI that is, have been very clear from the outset that they want a head coach. They want somebody out in the grass. They want somebody who, a little bit like Stephen Kenny, who was kind of had a big role in a lot of the underage, kind of the wider discussion on the underage setups. And we were in Paris, a few of us were in Paris last week or about 10 days ago for the Nations League draw and the UEFA Congress. And we asked Jonathan Hill and Mark Hanneman in this sort of mix zone afterwards, you know, in light of what was perceived to be the Carsley situation hitting stumbling blocks, where the FAI now changing tact and moving away from that initial blueprint of wanting a head coach and a real hands-on coach. And both Canham, the director of football, and Hill as chief executive, two men front and centre in the recruitment process for a new manager, both of them said no, that they were still sticking to that plan. There was no deviating away from it, that they were sticking to that plan. And that's why the Coleman thing, while there is definitely something in the Chris Coleman stuff, it just is a weird one, because Coleman, if you speak to anybody who was involved in the Wales setup when he got Wales to the semi-finals of the Euros in 2016, albeit with, you know, big names like Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey and people like that, he would very much be seen as a manager. He's not a hands-on coach. He's you know, I don't know, do you call it a bit old school in that respect? But he's, by all accounts, very much a manager, not a coach. So he doesn't fit the bill. He doesn't fit the bill for the profile, which is the curious side of this. So where we all stand with it, like, we're led to believe that something is imminent. You know, be it this week or next. Like, the FAI have a busy week, FAI Pathways plan, and they're in Leinster House before the Public Accounts Committee on Thursday. It's a busy week. But yeah, the clock is ticking down to the games in March. But you know, they haven't given up on Lee Carsley. Lee Carsley might have given up on the FAI. But from what I'm led to believe, the FAI have not given up on Lee Carsley. So
has there ever been an interest, Paul, to think on Carsley's side to take the job? Because, like, from going by, say, former teammates, Brian Kerr even, it just seems like it's been a one-way street in terms of interest for the job. And I don't know whether it's the FAI's mistake that they were led to believe that he was interested, or that maybe they should have been looking for alternative candidates. Maybe, like I said, it's 13 weeks or so now since Stephen Kenny's removed as manager. Should it be 6 weeks ago now since we should be looking for an alternative candidate?
Yeah, and look, with any of these things, you can only go, and I'm saying this from a media point of view, you can only go on the information you have and the people you speak to and your sources and the people you trust and the people you go to. I think if anybody in the media turns around as of today and tells you matter-of-factly what is happening in this process, they're talking crap, basically, because you know, there hasn't been a huge amount of information sort of drip fed out, certainly from the association. They wanted to keep the process as tight as they could, and in fairness to them, they've kept it tight enough. Some people have questioned the FAI's kind of media strategy, communication strategy around this, because you know, I've seen it, or I've heard it said, you know, maybe the FAI should be a little bit more open about their process at times, you know, have the odd press conference, do this, do that, and be a little bit more upfront and let people know what's going on, whereas the kind of the silence and the vacuum just that creates its own sort of noise and speculation and rumor, and you know, you'd have no idea whether some things that have appeared on TV, radio, online, newspapers has been damaging at any point in terms of a potential candidate might have been turned off because of something. But that's the FAI's communication strategy. That's their ploy. That's what they've done from the outset, was to keep this really, really quiet. And that's what they've chosen to do. And as for Carsley, like Carsley has long been the preferred candidate, the number one candidate, and he was in talks with them at various stages. And I think we've all been led to believe that there was definitely an interest at some point. But the suggestion over the last week seems to be that he's not returning, like that whatever stumbling block they've hit, and the suggestion seems to be it's a financial one. And again, not necessarily over his own salary, but perhaps, the wider pool of money that the association is making available to the management team to get the relevant people that he wants over the line. There seems to have been some sort of stumbling block with that. And, there is certainly a train of thought out there, depending on who you talk to, that Carsley's not returning. And that is that, basically. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier on. Like, if at the end of 13 weeks, and I don't mean, it's easy to say, I don't mean any disrespect, but if at the end of 13 weeks, we've heard from Mark Canham and we've heard from Jonathan Hill that this is a very thorough and robust process. That's the words that they've been using, thorough and robust process to find a new manager. And they said this in Paris 10 days ago, and they cited the search for Vera Pauw's successor as an example of a thorough and robust search, a global search. And they appointed the woman who was in the building all along, Eileen Gleeson. So, and she may well be the best person for that job. But if Chris Coleman is the best of the rest, I would love to know quite how thorough and robust this process was, and I'd love to know some of the really left field candidates.
Because my next question was to add to that point is, like, if this is the best, it's only my personal opinion, but the best they can draw up on as you said, a robust list is Chris Coleman. Surely then questions have to be asked already of the new technical director and the current CEO, who's failed to land as it stands of Monday this week. I know there's rumours of a sponsor coming in, but we've had no main sponsor since his arrival. And the whole selling point of Jonathan Hill was that we're going to getting a guy who's able to deliver a male team sponsor. It hasn't come yet, as of today.
Yeah.
I know there's one rumoured. And sure, it's a failure on his behalf if we land on Chris Coleman.
A failure in the sense of, like, Coleman could be what the players want. He could be, that kind of manager, kind of arm around the shoulder type manager who gets the best out of players. Like, again, I was saying earlier on about how he's not sort of viewed as a hands-on on the pitch coach, that he leaves that to other people, very much so. But from talking to a couple of people close to that setup when he was with Wales, one of the other things they said was, if you ask Gareth Bale, who to name his favourite managers, that Chris Coleman is right up there, because Bale seemed to really get on with Coleman in terms of the job he did for Wales. So what I would be asking is not necessarily if Chris Coleman is your best option, please explain the process. More so just that they're so wedded to this idea. And again, from the outset of a head coach and a hands-on manager and, somebody who will oversee kind of working with all the underage Ireland coaches. That's been what they've asked for from the outset. And it's what they, again, said to us in Paris last week. And if Chris Coleman is number 2 on their list and is their second choice and possibly even now their preferred candidate, I just question that whole process because he does not fit that profile in any shape or form.
If it is Chris Coleman, is the removal of Stephen Kenny as manager possibly an error if they don't land Carsley?
I know what you're getting at. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It, like, in terms of the profile that we're just talking about that the FA want, Kenny would have ticked all those boxes. But look, I think, and I was a supporter of Stephen Kenny from the outset, and and by the end of it, I think I felt like everybody else did, that there comes a point where you're really, really willing it to work and you want it to work, but you do still also have to just get some results, and there just weren't enough of them. And I think it had just petered out and was the end of the road. So I wouldn't be buying the kind of idea that if it is Chris Coleman to be Ireland manager, that we should have stuck with Stephen Kenny in the end. I think there's a shelf life for every manager, and look, Kenny gave it a great go and didn't always have it easy with COVID and stuff. But none of the international managers had it easy with COVID. So there's excuses there as well that we don't need to go over old roads. But I just don't know where it's going to go. I do get the sense that we'll have a new manager in the next 10 days or so, but I still can't call it. Like it's just been the weirdest, and I've kind of covered a lot of Ireland managerial succession races, Staunton and Trapattoni and Martin O'Neill and stuff like that. But this has definitely been one of the more sort of slightly surreal ones,
And as of now, there's no board meeting scheduled.
No, and that is another thing that they kind of, Jonathan Hill and Paul Cook, the new president of the FAI, again, when we spoke to them, we don't speak to them all that often because they don't do an awful lot of media. Like we were camped outside, camped in the car park, a handful of us in Abbottstown after their last board meeting, and Paul Cook and Tony Cohan, the new FAI independent chair of the board, they did come out the front door and they kind of gave us 30 seconds, good meeting or whatever, sort of whatever. But like Jonathan Hill, Mark Cannon, they all went out a side door and had their cars parked around the far side of the building and kind of seemed to take great joy in driving straight past us and a little nod, But in terms of a board meeting for this one, they did say in Paris at the Nations League draw that any decision that's made, any decision on a manager that is eventually made and settled on, no contract can be offered to any candidate until they hold a board meeting. But that can be scrambled pretty quickly. That can be done. That can be done on Zoom. That can be done on Microsoft Teams. Any of those platforms. So that's not a massive obstacle. But they have a busy week this week with the FAI or the Pathways launch in the Aviva, back in the Oireachtas on Thursday, and I think they're also mindful of not kind of announcing managers on the days of League of Ireland matches when the season's only starting and all that type of thing. So I suggest, I think it'll be another. I could be wrong. They might announce a manager on Wednesday, but I'd say in the next week or 10 days, I'd say it should be done.
Last question for you then before you go. You're saying to me tomorrow they're going to the FA Pathway Plan launch? Yeah,
heading there in the morning, yeah.
What are you expecting to hear or see?
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's obviously a fairly expansive plan that encompasses all sorts of strands of the game, from the grassroots to League of Ireland to the Irish, to the adult amateur game, to League of Ireland, to the senior, to the international football. But I think like this isn't the final launch of this Pathways plan. It's kind of the end of the first series or two of consultations, and it's going to be an idea of their thinking. As ever in Irish football, I think the schoolboys sort of section of it will probably be where there's a little bit of tension maybe between the kind of the more established sort of older guard schoolboy side of things and maybe where the FAI want to go in terms of, not just the calendar year, but, there's I don't know what's been sort of left in the final plans because I wasn't at the consultation. I wasn't at any of the consultation ones that they did around the country last week. But I like I think there was radical sort of various radical ideas to introducing different aspects of things to the schoolboy calendar in terms of the amount of matches that are off in January and February. But still maybe trying to encompass maybe more sort of futsal and things like that, indoor things. But that's all well and good if you have facilities. So look, I can't really shed a huge amount more light on it, but looking forward to sort of hearing what they have to say about it tomorrow and see if there's any meat in the bones.
Sure, we'll probably be chatting in 10 more days anyway when the FEI appoint a new manager. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. It could be could be any time, yeah.
Paul, as always, thanks so much for coming on. Chat again soon.
Yeah, cheers, Luke. Thanks a lot.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it.
And that was Paul O'Hare there recording on Monday. Since then, actually, looks like Chris Coleman has been ruled out. But look, what can you do? We've recorded on the Monday, and then after recording, apparently Chris Coleman's out of the job. John Shea now apparently is heavily linked with the interim coming in. But the situation could change in the next 24 hours when this podcast comes out. So we'll reconvene next week on the issue. Looking ahead then to game week 2 in the League of Ireland, we'll start with the Premier Division. So Tallaght United take on Waterford. Big game in Tallaght Park this Friday. Shelbourne take on Shamrock Rovers. Another big game in the south side of Dublin. St. Patrick's take on Bohemians. Dundalk face Galway United and Sligo Rovers face Derry City. And in the First Division Friday night, we have Cove Ramblers at Lone Town, UCD Treaty United, Finn Harps Cork City, Wexford Longford Town, and Kerry take on Bray. Quick word on last week. Great to see such a big away allocation sold for Kerry in Turner's Cross for the first game of the season. So that was great to see. Oisin will be back on Saturday morning with League of Ireland voice notes to get your around the ground reports from the Friday night action. Huge thanks to all our guests again, Paul O'Hare, Oisin Langan, and Donal Ryan for calling this week. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll chat to you all next week.